All right, so today we are taking a deep dive into something we all do literally every single day, every time we read or listen to someone talk.
Oh, intriguing. Let me guess. Is it about, how our brains make sense of language?
That's exactly it. It's called sentence parsing, and it's like the behind-the-scenes magic trick our brains perform to take a bunch of words and turn them into, well, meaning.
We do take it for granted. We just hear a sentence and boom, we understand it. But if you actually stop and think about it, the mental gymnastics our brain is doing is pretty wild.
Right. It's mind-boggling how quickly and effortlessly we parse sentences, but it makes you wonder, how on earth do neuroscientists even begin to study something that happens so automatically?
Neuroscience has some pretty amazing tools these days.
Like what?
Well, for starters, we've got electroencephalography, EEG, and we have fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging.
And those can actually show what's happening in the brain while someone's processing language.
Precisely. With EEG, we can see the electrical activity in the brain, and fMRI tracks changes in blood flow, which tells us which brain areas are working hardest during a task.
So we can literally watch the brain working on language in real time. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So what kind of things have these techniques revealed about sentence parsing?
Oh, tons of fascinating stuff. For example, there was this groundbreaking study using fMRI looking at what happens in the brain when people encounter those tricky garden path sentences.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know those sentences that kind of lead you down one path of meaning but then suddenly switch it up on you?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I think I know what you mean. Got an example.
Sure, the horse raced past the barn fell. It tricks you for a moment, doesn't it?
It totally does. At first you think the horse is racing, but then bam, you realize it's about a horse that fell after being raced.
Exactly. And this study showed that when people hit that unexpected twist, there's a huge spike in activity in a part of the brain called Broca's area.
Hmm. Broca's area. Ringing a bell. Isn't that involved in language processing?
It is. It's especially important for syntax, the rules of how we structure sentences. So it seems like Broca's area is really working hard to resolve those unexpected grammatical turns.
So basically, we can actually see our brains lighting up when we hit a grammatical snag. That's amazing. Okay, so this is all about how native speakers parse sentences. But what about someone who's learning a new language? Does their brain go through the same process?
That's a question that's got researchers really excited. It seems like while similar brain areas are at play for both native and non-native speakers, there are likely some subtle but important differences.
Interesting. What kind of differences?
Well, some studies suggest that as someone becomes more fluent in a new language, their brain might actually develop new pathways, sort of like shortcuts, for parsing those sentences.
So like their brain figures out more efficient ways to handle the new language.
Exactly. It's like their brain is creating a more streamlined route through the complex landscape of a new grammar. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about it.
Totally.
Yeah.
The more you practice anything, the more efficient you become,
Mm.
right? So for our listeners out there who are learning a new language, give yourselves a pat on the back because your brains are seriously hard at work.
Absolutely. They're doing some incredible rewiring. And speaking of languages, it really makes you wonder if sentence parsing works the same way across all the different languages in the world.
I was just thinking that
Okay.
because, languages can have such wildly different sentence structures. Some languages are like super strict about word order.
Exactly. Like English, we tend to stick to a pretty fixed subject-verb-object structure.
Yeah, but other languages, like I think I've heard Russian is like this, can be much more flexible about where words go in a sentence.
You're exactly right. And that means the brain might have to use different parsing strategies depending on the language.
I love that. It's like trying to navigate a city with a perfectly organized grid system versus one where the streets are like winding and totally unpredictable.
Oh, ha, what a great analogy. But wouldn't a more flexible word order actually be, well, kind of cool? Because couldn't it allow for, I don't know, more creative expression or something? Maybe there's a trade-off, right?
A trade-off between like ease of processing and the richness of the language.
Yes. I mean, a more rigid word order might be easier for the brain to parse, but a more flexible one might open up a whole world of nuances in meaning. It's a really interesting question for researchers to explore further.
So cool. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the brain regions involved in sentence parsing, how it might differ between native and non-native speakers, and even how different language structures could come into play. But let's get practical for a second. How does all this knowledge about sentence parsing actually translate into, well, real-world applications?
The implications are huge. For example, understanding how the brain parses sentences is absolutely essential for building better natural language processing systems. Think about it. Chatbots, translation software, all as AI-powered tools we're increasingly interacting with.
Oh, right. So we're talking about making these systems more human-like, right?
Exactly. By incorporating these insights about sentence parsing into algorithms, we can create machines that interact with us in a much more intuitive and, dare I say, natural way.
It's almost like we're on the verge of being able to truly talk to machines,
Yeah.
like they really understand us.
It's exciting, for sure, but the applications go far beyond just cool tech.
Really? Like what?
Well, think about language disorders. Conditions like aphasia, where people struggle with understanding or producing language.
Oh, right. Of course.
Understanding sentence parsing at that deep neural level could help us develop therapies that are way more targeted and effective for folks dealing with those conditions.
And didn't you mention earlier that aging can also affect how we parse sentences?
You have a great memory. Yes, as we get older, some cognitive functions, including those involved in language, might naturally decline a bit.
So things like understanding really complex sentences or keeping up with fast-paced conversations might become more challenging.
Exactly. And research on sentence parsing in older adults can help us find ways to support healthy cognitive aging.
It's incredible, isn't it? This thing we do every single day without even a second thought, just understanding a sentence.
Right.
But it turns out it's actually this incredibly complex process, a beautiful dance between brain regions, language structures, and all these different cognitive processes.
Absolutely. And what's even more exciting is that we've really just begun to uncover the secrets of this amazing ability. There's so much more to learn.
And after this deep dive, I think I have a whole new appreciation for what my brain is doing every time I hear a sentence. It makes you wonder, could a deeper understanding of sentence parsing actually help us become better communicators in general? More effective writers? Maybe. That's something I'll definitely be pondering. And for our listeners, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to, keep exploring this fascinating field. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the brain.